Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about the new student experience, the new account experience for students when they log into GED.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the research we did, how and why we made some of the decisions that we made in this student experience. And really, hopefully what you get out of this is that we're really focused on working with real students and understanding what is important to them, how do they look at the information that's presented, working with real teachers and understanding what are some of the ways in which the GED.com experience can support teachers. And we will have plenty of time for questions at the end of this. So welcome. Before we get started, I'll introduce myself. I am Sarita Parikh. I've been with GED for about 7 years, and my role is really focused on helping more students reach their goals, helping more students start, helping them persist and ultimately graduate and go on to do more in their lives. And, really that means two things. That means that our goal and much of what I do is working with real students and real teachers to really understand students' mindsets and their goals and what is it that they set out to do. What are some of the behaviors and feelings they have, and what are their expectations and mental models? It also means that our goal organizationally, and I think we share this with almost every one of you on the phone, is that we want to really make sure that these experiences are built to support people. We understand the challenges that many of our students face, and our goal is to really help alleviate some of those challenges and really work in their models so that they can persist and reach their goals. So when I say student experience, what does that mean? It means really what you think it means. It means that how does a student experience the GED in whole? So that's GED.com, social media, test centers, and ultimately I think we have a really strong goal to partner more actively with teachers and classrooms and learn more from teachers about how this experience can be even more effective for students. And before we get into the actual new GED.com experience, I want to share a little bit of background on some of the research that we did and what informs the choices that this new website has. If you've been in the GED world for a while, you know that GED Testing Service has been doing research with real students for a really long time. Some of you may remember research even back to the 90s with Margaret Patterson. And a couple of years ago, we picked up these efforts again, and we really wanted to make sure we stopped looking at this as maybe how we think it might work or sort of secondhand stories that we were hearing, and really focus on meeting with real students and understanding their real challenges. And so we spoke with students all over the country. We did one-on-one interviews, and of course we wanted to understand people's relationships to the GED. That was, of course, a given. But really, we wanted to understand their backgrounds and their aspirations and what a typical day looks like. What were some of the things they experienced and the challenges they experienced in a typical day? And we learned a lot of things in that process. We definitely learned that there is so much diversity amongst GED students. Not just demographic diversity, but mindset diversity. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And I will say that at this point, I think I've spoken to over 100 teachers in different settings all over the country. And when I share what we learned in our research, mostly teachers say, yep, that's right. That's what I see in my classroom. So I don't think there's too much that I can say that, that you don't already know. You know much of this. So I will do something different. What I'm going to do right now is ask you guys to join me on a mission. So what I've learned is when I talk to teachers, they know, they understand the challenges of GED students, and they feel it deep in their bones, this goal of helping more people be successful. But what I've also learned is that when I meet people who are not in the GED world, and so this is friends and families and just people that I come across day to day, and when I talk about my work with the GED, I see that so many people have preconceptions about who is an adult who didn't finish high school. And you'll see these preconceptions, they show up in body language, you'll see a little twitch in their eye, you'll see that people have these visceral responses to, what does the GED mean? And so I'm on a myth-busting mission, on a GED myth-busting mission. And I think there's 3 myths that are really pervasive and they're wrong. And so the 3 myths are, first and foremost, the stereotype of an adult who didn't finish high school. You know, people have visions in their mind of why an adult might drop out of high school. And, you know, the reality is people leave high school for so many reasons. You know, they're bullied, or they're taking care of family, they're getting jobs to put food on the table, abuse. You know, some of the stories that we hear about why people leave high school, you think that no kid should grow up that way. And so these stereotypes are wrong, and that GED students have the same aspirations as anybody else, the same aspirations as any of us on the phone, as almost anyone in this country. You know, they want their kids to have better lives than them, and they want to be role models, and they want part of the American dream, just like all of us. So that's myth number one. The stereotype isn't right. The second myth on my myth-busting crusade is that adults who didn't finish high school, this idea that they don't understand the value of education, or that they don't want it deeply enough. And again, that's false. That's not true. And we all know that education is part of the American mindset. But if you're an adult and you didn't finish high school and you come into the GED world, you understand that direct and strong relationship between education and success and jobs and career, all of those things. You want it. You may not have the skills on how to actually persist or achieve those academic goals, but it's not an issue of desire. It's not an issue of misunderstanding the value of education. And then the third myth is that people aren't smart enough. And again, that's false. You know, most of the people who come into the GED world are intellectually capable of being at the high school level, and in fact, far ahead of the high school level. We're seeing it in the post-secondary outcomes of GED graduates. It's not an issue of intellectual capability. Again, people's beliefs and people's habits might hinder them. They may have habits that don't support academic success, but it's not an issue of intellect. So that's my myth-busting crusade, 3 myths, and if you're interested in joining, please do. All right, what we also learned is when we talk about diversity of students, we found that there were 4 really common personas, and these are mindsets that students have. And of course, every human is different, and so when you see these personas, you'll say, well, of course, there's mix and match. But the idea is there were very common themes amongst the students that we spoke to, and we spoke to over 100 students in person and actually have, at this point, data on thousands and thousands of students. And so here's the common personas that we've seen. The first is the determined persona, and these are people who have the mindset that I will get my GED. And these are people who are going to earn their GEDs. There's, whatever happens, if there's setbacks, if there's difficulties, they have intrinsic motivation that will get them to the finish line. And it's not unusual for someone to have some sort of external trigger, so say losing a job, maybe getting a promotion, having a baby. All of those sorts of things might be external triggers that trigger people into being determined. But this is a group of people who often are going to earn their GED. So I'll give you a few seconds to look at this before I move to the next slide. All right, and we will send these out for everybody. So if you don't get a chance to look at them too deeply now, we will definitely send these out. The next persona is called the family go-to persona. And these are people, they're usually women. They're usually the hubs of their families. And this is a mindset, a persona that's characterized by the mindset that I can. So these are people who often know that they're capable. They have no doubt about their academic capabilities, but day to day, they are taking care of children, they're taking care of their adult parents, sometimes their siblings, and they have a very strong sense of responsibility to their families. And what that means is that even though they have a strong desire to be role models and lead by example, they feel like prioritizing themselves is really tough, that's not something they do. They often prioritize other people over themselves. They're often exhausted. There's not a lot of gas left in the tank when you're taking care of people all day. And even though they know they're capable, it's tough to prioritize the GED right now. So I'll give you a few seconds with this one. The next persona is one that we call the here and now persona. And these are people who also believe that they're capable and they know that they will get their GED, but later. They don't need to get it right now. And so it's very similar to the family go-to because it's not an issue of doubt or doubt in their capability. But right now they might be working, they might have the things that they need, and so they don't have to get their GED right now. There isn't anything that's saying this is the time to do it. There's often a lot of things competing for their attention. Staying focused is really tough. I'll give you a few seconds with this one. And the last persona is what we call the disheartened persona. The mindset for this persona is that I will try to get my GED, but I'm not really sure if I can. And this is a tough one because, you all know the quote, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. That belief that maybe I can't do it is really debilitating. It can be paralyzing. That fear of failure can be so paralyzing that sometimes people think that failure is preordained. And, again, it's usually not an issue of intellectual capability, but it is definitely an issue of belief. So I'll give you a few seconds with this one. All right, so with such diverse mindsets, one of the key questions is what can we do about it? So how can a student experience really help people wherever they are, whatever their mindset is? How can it help complement what people are learning in the classroom and work in the mindset and the mental models of our students? And the good news is there's a lot of research out there about helping people achieve their goals. I'm assuming that many of you are familiar with the Carol Dweck mindset research, academic mindset research. That's groundbreaking. There's also an area of social science called behavioral sciences, and this is really focusing on common patterns that people fall into and how you can help people achieve their goals and sort of work in the grain of how people think and how they act. There's also quite a bit of usability research and design research out there. And so over the last year, we've really delved into this research, and we've continued researching and looking at data and talking with teachers and talking with students and really trying to figure out what is an effective way to help the student experience, help people achieve their goals. And ultimately, I think this is true for every one of us at the GED, and I think there's 530 people on this phone call, and I bet we all have the same goal. Our goal at the end of the day is to help more people move into the middle class. That's what this is all about. And part of this is helping them not just achieve their GED, but build the mindset so that when they've graduated, that they feel like they're ready for the next thing, or that they have proof and empowerment that they can move on to the next thing. Going to college, getting a career, not just a job, being role models to their families, and really ultimately achieving a better, more stable life, a more secure life. So let me show you what some of this looks like in the new GED.com experience. All right. Could someone chat really quickly? Could you just give me a thumbs up or a yes if you can see welcome to GED screen? Elizabeth, can you chime in? Can you see the welcome to GED screen? Okay, thank you. All right, so you're all familiar with the new GED.com homepage. This was released back in May. This was built working with teachers, with students, with state administrators, with test centers, with a number of different groups of people, and really focused on that broad audience and the diversity of information and expectations that people had coming into GED.com. And the student experience is really focused on the account that a student sees when they're going through the GED process. So this is focused on everything from practicing with practice questions, seeing your scores, scheduling your tests, even kind of learning the basics. What is the GED? So when a student creates an account today, or on August 14th, students that have accounts already, they're going to see a brand new look and feel. And you'll see here that there's quick reading. As we go through this, you'll see different quotes. So every time the student comes in, they'll see a different quote. I certainly love this Michelle Obama quote. This one speaks a lot to me. When students come in, they'll also see, one of the first things they'll see is an introduction of what the GED entails. So let's look at that. So one of the things we learned in the research is that based on where a student is in their journey, they have different amounts of information that they know or don't know. And we learned that many students, when they were first starting their GED journey, didn't know that there were 4 tests, thought that they could take the tests on the internet, a number of different things. And so what this is focused on sort of those basics. What are the first things you need to know about the GED process? So we start by letting people know that there are 4 tests. We focus in on that really kind of key concept that you can take them in any order that you want, really at any time. We make sure that we let the students see the cost of the test, and I'll show you more about that in a minute. Students know that they need to take the test at a test center. So it's not about taking it in a web browser or on your phone. That students can go to class to get help. That students also have the option of doing it on their own, and that there's material for that. And ultimately, you can work at your own pace. We also wanted to focus on making sure that people knew that there are 20 million GED graduates out there. It's really the biggest alumni network in the world. And, you know, one of our goals undoubtedly is to help people look at the GED as what it is. It is a marker of fortitude, and trying to really eliminate the stigma that's associated with it. And why? Why do people do the GED? All right. You'll also see at this top section is a section focused on each of the content areas. And so let's take a look. We'll take a look at math. So this is a new page, and you'll see that it looks very different than it looked before. The idea here is that everything about math is on a single page. And one of the things that I hope you'll see here is that this is all information that always existed in the GED.com student experience. But now it's set up in a way that aligns to how students expected to see it. So we really focused on understanding what were their expectations, so not what were our expectations or how did we think students would look at it, but we actually worked with students to understand how they would really look at the information. And we found the same concept that we mentioned earlier, that there are some really fundamental things that people needed to know up front. So the math test, for example, that it's 115 minutes, that there are 2 parts in that test, and those parts are not just multiple choice. There's different types of questions. You can use a calculator in part 2. The topics that are on math, and the cost of the math test. I'm in Minnesota. Minnesota actually has a $10 discount on the GED test right now. And so that's embedded in here so that students know that they will get a discount. Minnesota students will know that they get a discount. We also focused on making the study guides much easier to access. Hopefully most of you have seen the study guides. We found that the content has been really helpful for people, but they don't know how to find them. So we made them very prominent. And we added something new to the study guide. We added an introduction to the overall math test. So this is just what you need to know at the beginning. We'll go through this. So what does math cover? What does this math study guide cover? We wanted to make sure that students really understood that they don't need to know everything on the test. I'm sure many of you have seen this from students. There's an expectation that on that score range of 200, a lot of times people feel like they need to be getting a 180 or a 190 or a 200. They feel uncomfortable with the 145 score, and we wanted to be really clear that you don't have to know everything in the guide, you don't have to know everything in the test to pass it. And ultimately, all of the GED tests are critical thinking tests. They're not memorization tests. Then the math study guide goes into the skills. You've probably seen this before, but this is a different format. Each of the skills, and then a sample question to help people understand what that skill really means. So this one's a fairly straightforward example, putting fractions and decimals in order. Maybe we can look at another example. Then we go to basic algebra. And so this one is a little bit more intimidating, we've seen for students. And so focusing on what does that mean to, what do linear expressions mean? And giving a sample question. So there's a study guide section for each of the 4 sections of the math test. Then there are math practice questions, and these are very similar to the flash practice questions that students see, but these are just free for students to kind of get a sample of the types of questions on the test. And you'll see, I won't actually go through the math on this one because it'll take me a minute, but you'll see that when a student selects an answer, they'll get a detailed explanation of the question, what the question's asking, and the rationale for the answer. And the student can do this, as you can, hopefully you can see that this is really built for mobile first. It works on a computer and it works on a tablet and a phone. But we do know that many of our students initially come in mobile first. So we wanted to make sure that this was really comfortable, a comfortable user experience for people on their phones. Students can also see the math flash questions if they think that that's going to be something that helps them prepare. And of course the GED Ready, which is really invaluable for preparation for many students. They'll also be able to see classes. So if they haven't signed up for a class yet, they'll be able to find a class close to them. So for me, I chose one that's very close to where I live, St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Hopefully you're all familiar with the GED, the Adult Ed Prep Connect, which helps students find local prep centers and share their scores with their teachers. If they're interested in GED Live, that's also something that they can find. And then students, of course, can see their test scores. They can see test tips. This may be something that you're familiar with. This very much looks the same as it's looked for the last 6 months or so. Just kind of some quick tips. And the test scores also look like the same score page that you've seen in the past. So I haven't taken any tests. I don't actually have any scores to show, but if I did, we would see scores here. Let's take a look at the other subject areas really quickly. Language arts is very much the same model. You'll see the 3 parts are laid out. It is without an accommodation, it's a 150-minute test and the topics are covered. And then of course, each of these topics has a study guide. So reading for meaning, for example, has a description of each skill and then sample questions that help people understand, what does that skill really mean in terms of a question. Again, most of this is information that was there before, but it's really aligned to how our students expect to find it. Our goal is to make it easy and to remove the intimidation and to make it very easy to find in a way that you can understand the information very quickly. The practice questions are also, again, mobile friendly. So a student can read the passage, and then answer the question and see a detailed explanation and rationale for the answer. And we'll look really quickly at social studies. One of the things that I think is we've seen a lot from students is an expectation about memorization. And we've tried to be really clear. What we've heard students say things like, I think I'm never going to memorize the periodic table of elements, or I have such a hard time diagramming sentences. And we wanted to help people recognize that those are not really parts of the GED. It's not about memorization. And so we repeat that point throughout. So for example, in social studies, that you don't have to memorize capitals of cities or of countries or states or time frames of events. This is really about applying the information that you learn, that you read in the passage. When a student is ready to schedule their test, we also learned that there's, as you probably know, the process of scheduling takes a bit of time. And so what we wanted to do was help people get a sense of what to expect, because it does take about 10 minutes to schedule a test. And so we wanted to set students' expectations up front. As many of you know, we do ask students some questions. This is data that we share with individual states, demographic data about students. And it's used for quite a bit of research for a number of states and certainly at GED as well. Students then, after they answer those demographic questions, they select which subjects, where they want to take the test, and then the actual schedule. So there are a number of decisions that a student has to make. And of course, ultimately, they pay for that test or use a voucher. And so they see that screen to give them a quick background before they actually go into the scheduling process. And then, of course, the scheduling process is unchanged. I've heard from many of you that that's something we'd like to update, and I agree. I think it is quite a long process, and our goal is to shorten that and make that easier for users. One last thing that I'll point out is that if a student is in a state that has a discount right now, that we try to make that discount really prominent for the student. If the student is in a state where maybe there's a requirement, for example, if the student has to, for example, take a GED Ready before they take their operational test, those pieces of information to help a student know what they need to do are going to be really prominent on the homepage. Again, you probably remember that that information used to be embedded in some messages, and it was hard for students to see that. They didn't recognize or didn't see that information very clearly. And so we wanted to surface that in a way that was really easy to see and easy to access. So that is a quick view of the GED student experience, and I wanted to point out a couple of really critical things. We, of course, wanted to focus in on how students think, and given the diversity of our students, we know that there isn't a one-size-fits-all model. And with those personas that we looked at, one of our key goals over the years, and really now and in an ongoing fashion, is to continue working with students and continue helping understand what different students need at different times, and helping them get what they need easily in a way that they recognize that's not intimidating very quickly. And so that's something that will be ongoing research, and hopefully you'll see in a year from now, hopefully you'll see even more changes and even more tools and tips and things that will help more people be successful. All right, well, what we'll do is we'll send out the personas and we'll send out the slide deck. And don't hesitate to reach out to me. My name is Sarita Parikh at GED.com, so sarita.parikh@GED.com. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to see them. If you have any suggestions or feedbacks from your classrooms or from your students, please don't hesitate to share them. We would love to know what people think. And we definitely look at this as an ongoing process. So if there's any areas that you think aren't working, we want to hear about it. We would love to know. If you think there are any areas that you think are really effective, we would love to know that as well. All right. Well, thank you for your time.